I set it up like a small play with a beginning about my career, how I enjoyed things, leading up to the point where I said to him, the problem is, guys, when I look in the mirror at night, I don't see the guy that you see. The guy that I see is really quite different. He has lack of self-esteem, he has lack of confidence, he has anxieties that he doesn't want you to know about. He'd be embarrassed if you found out because he'd be worried that you think he couldn't do his job. But you know what? I can't keep that mask on anymore. It's coming off.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Life's Second Act. This is the podcast that delves into the challenges, new directions and uncertainties that can come during midlife. I do that through talking to people who have a story to tell, an insight to share or a snippet of something special. My name's Simon Burgess and in this episode I'm speaking to Alan Sowersby. Alan is 67 and a man who spent much of his life feeling like he was simply going through the motions. As Alan grew in his career, he battled with OCD, which impacted his work and his personal life. The high-stakes, high-stress environment fueled his obsessive-compulsive tendencies, making it challenging to balance his responsibilities. Retirement, coupled with the 2020 lockdown, provided an unexpected opportunity for Alan to reflect and rediscover himself. He found solace and purpose in writing, exploring his experiences and emotions through poetry and eventually publishing a book, Breaking My Silence. His book enabled him to celebrate his neurodiversity to help him make peace with the man that he discovered hiding behind the mask. Today, Alan embraces his second act with newfound passion and determination to live on his own terms. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this.
I suppose what I'm hoping to learn through our conversation here is how you sort of navigated that demanding career, battling with that OCD, and eventually reaching that breaking point to confront your well-being, I suppose. So I think your story underlines this idea that it's never too late to rewrite your own script and sort of find fulfillment in your own terms. But before we explore this and that moment when you came from behind the mask, talk to me about OCD. I think many of us have a basic understanding of it, but how did it present itself to you in your first act and how did it impact you in your earlier life?
OCD, 3 small letters. However, it's probably one of the most unknown of these kind of mental health issues. We sometimes play lip service. Oh, I'm a little bit OCD. And people would, I guess, think, oh, someone who likes things to be ordered on a shelf. Simple things. Well, I call that tidiness, to be fair. And what I didn't know until I found the reason to look online about OCD, because much of my life I felt the impact of it, but didn't know what it was, which was frustrating. So it was a long, long time before I actually worked it out, what was wrong with me. But the feelings inside are quite difficult to say because they crept up in me. I was like at work, as you said, in a quite a pressured environment. I was 2 people. If you split me down in half, there was an outer shell, which was jovial, laughed a lot. He was confident. He could stand in front of a crowd and make a speech. He was analytical. He was pretty competent, if I don't mind saying so, in what he did, because he was a researcher and he took a great deal of pride in what he did. He was very reliable in terms of how he approached his work, perhaps a little too much. I'd been in 2 long careers, the first one where I was very comfortable, and when I went on to my second career where I was, both were about 20 years in time, I felt a little unsettled there. And it was because I was in midlife, perhaps, but the inside was, so different. In fact, it was a guy with low self-esteem, lack of confidence despite the cheeriness on the face. I was really struggling inside, feeling that I wasn't really very good at what I did. I can remember one time in a management team training course, because in my latter career, I was on the management team for the whole of the 20 years. I remember having a Myers-Briggs assessment, there was one part where I read the description which said, Alan can be over-compassionate. And I don't know what it was, Simon, but, I thought, I got a weakness. I looked around at all these other guys in the room and I thought, these are the guys, there's a bit of tension in the business, people deal with it, a bit of rough and tumble. Oh, I'm not a leader. I can't tell you how much that impacted me. I only realise it now looking back.
What kind of age were you, Alan, when that happened?
I would have been in my early 40s. And I was at a senior level in this company where I thought, I've got responsibilities which I take very seriously, but I felt a little bit like an imposter. That's the only way I know how to explain it. And I had no idea I had OCD at this time. But I think this drive to make sure I didn't mess up came to fruition here. And the OCD thing is, I haven't even really explained it yet because it's so difficult to know where to start. Go back to the vases on the shelf. Someone thinks, I like them to be equally spaced apart. Somebody with OCD proper, there'll be a consequence for not having them equally apart. Somebody might die. I'm not just saying that. Something will happen to my family if I don't do it in a certain way, a certain procedure. I didn't have that particular type because there are so many different variants of OCD. People really do need to Google it and research it to understand. That's why I think it makes it difficult for people with OCD to talk about it and to release it.
So when you look back to that time now, in hindsight, with the knowledge that you have about yourself, how did it manifest itself to you?
Well, from a work environment, it was poor work-life balance. I was so committed to work. I felt I needed to get a weekend to myself. I needed to have everything sorted by Friday. And it never worked like that. I would search around for things to worry about in my work that day. If I sorted everything out, my brain would be searching around for something else that I had. Oh, you haven't spoken to one of your team this week. I'll worry what they were thinking of me. And I'd go into the weekend still thinking on Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon. Come Sunday, towards Monday, I'm back in the driving seat. I'm back in control. And suddenly all the things I worried about on Friday night were gone. They'd evaporated. All the catastrophes that I'd imagined over the weekend didn't transpire. So I felt great on Mondays. I could speak to someone, I could deal with things. Then I had to build up to the next Friday. You can see what's happening here, this cycle of building up. And that's how it manifests itself in physical terms with work. The things I did, I would worry about making mistakes at work. I'd overanalyze things I'd done to make sure there were no mistakes because I might lose business for the company. I might bring the company into disrepute. I might say things inappropriately and forget I've said them and inadvertently upset or I don't know what the word is, be rude to somebody. And I'd worry intensely about these things behind the scenes. I'd also laterally worry about driving, where I was driving past the primary school on the way home from work. I'd have to drive very, very slowly to make sure that I didn't knock someone down, not knock a small child down. Often have to stop the car and look behind me just to make sure there was nothing there. As time went, I developed more and more of these little anxieties, which became habits, which became obsessions.
How did you come to terms with what was going on, or did you not?
I didn't deal with anything, Simon. That's the honest answer. There's a little bit of a thread going through my Act 1 about not dealing with things, even when you recognize them. I hid it all, basically, Simon, because I was embarrassed. The load and the fear of being uncovered was more than the OCD itself. It really was a fear of being found out. And so every time something happened, I just buried it more. And there was an occasion where in the future I would tell my wife that I was going to go and see a doctor. And she said to me, are you going to talk about the taps and the switches and things? And I said, well, not just that. I'm going to tell him about everything. And she said, what do you mean everything? And then I had to realize I had to tell her about maybe 12, 15 other things that I did habitually that she didn't know about. She was quite shocked. I hadn't even told my wife.
And what age was that?
55, late 50s.
Yeah, okay.
I'd been burying this for a long time. It became second nature. I was a master of disguise, Simon. I deserved an equity card. I really did. And I didn't mask it with my wife because eventually when she realized how stressed I was, it wasn't difficult for her to realize that I wasn't happy. Not unhappy with her, happy with my work-life balance. And she was my counselor. But she didn't know really how to deal with OCD because I didn't know how to deal with it. In fact, it became a long time until I got therapy where she realized from some of the things the therapist was saying that she needed to help me to deal with it.
What did you fear by speaking about it?
Oh, I think I felt, if I talked about it with my family, well, I didn't want to talk about it because I just thought it was a weakness. I didn't want to talk about it at work because I feared that people might think, they might change their opinion of me. They might think, well, if Alan's got all this happening inside his head, how the heck can he do his job? Professional incompetence. Oh, it became such a big ball of confusion, Simon. It was just a no-go area.
Yeah.
Ignore it. It's not happening. Smile wider, Alan.
Yep.
Make a joke.
So there was a tipping point, I suppose, or a point where you did come from behind the mask. Talk to me about that time and how that showed itself. I believe it was when you retired and you moved on. Talk to me about that. What happened?
Just before that, there was an occasion where, I have to mention this, I was worrying about something intensely one night in a hotel at work. And I didn't sleep all night and I woke up with what was like jet lag. And I think this is a very important point because this came first. I sat down at the breakfast table staring into space thinking, Alan, this cannot go on. You are not incompetent. You are ill. You need to go and see a doctor. And I said that to myself and I could feel a wave of peace and serenity flowing over me. Like I just realized something. It's not you. You are ill and you need help. You can't hold this in any longer. You are really, really, really hurting yourself here. And so I went to a doctor that day. And that was the start of my recovery.
What was it that morning, Alan, that suddenly, what was it that day? It wasn't the day before, the week or the year before?
It was my barrel had reached, it was flowing over and I thought, I can't handle this anymore. I'm going to explode. I have to do something. And even before that, I had actually seen a cartoon at work one day on a mental health thing, which showed somebody, a cartoon character with OCD. And I blushed, Simon. I absolutely was red with embarrassment. Nobody noticed, but I actually Googled it that day and realized what I had. So it was only until 2018 that A, I reached the tipping point, and B, I actually knew what it was that was doing it.
Yeah.
From that point on, there was a couple of years where I did very little about it, but I was beginning to understand myself more. I'd call this a little bit of intermission between Act 1 and Act 2, but I had another meltdown after that. I got signed off work for a month because I was building up to retirement, but I wasn't doing it well. It was almost like the Friday of all Fridays coming up. I was going to retire, and this was a career end. So I was building pressure on myself, and I got signed off. But in the next few months, when I knew I would be retiring in March 2020, I started in some sleepless points at night thinking, what am I going to do when I leave here? What will the next chapter of my life be? How am I going to deal with all this stuff here? How am I going to process it all? And I started making up scenarios in my head. And I thought, right, I'm going to make a speech before I go. And I'm going to either say two things. One, it's been fantastic working with you. I'm going to miss you all. Goodbye. Or, do you know what, Alan? You've been on the management team of this company for 20 years. You've been in a position of responsibility. You've been ill. You've been masking it. You've just done a mental well-being course for first aiders in the company that you work with to understand more about mental health. And you're going to walk away. How can you do that? And I said to myself, Alan, I remember this thing, the fear of doing something isn't as bad as the regret of not doing it. And I said, Alan, how can you live with yourself if you leave all these people thinking you are the smiley, happy chappy, when in fact you're being consumed by a demon inside? How can you do that? And you know what's wrong with you, and you know how much it impacts when people don't talk about it. So what are you going to do? And over a 3-month period, I kid you not, nothing written down, I constructed many variants of a speech that eventually became a story. I set it up like a small play with a beginning, an old light fluffy about my career, how I enjoyed things, leading up to the point where I said to him, the problem is, guys, when I look in the mirror at night, I don't see the guy that you see. The guy that I see is really quite different. He has lack of self-esteem. He has lack of confidence. He has anxieties that he doesn't want you to know about. He'd be embarrassed if you found out it because he'd be worried that you think he couldn't do his job. But you know what? I can't keep that mask on anymore. It's coming off. So right in front of you now, I'm telling you, I have OCD, I have anxieties, and I absolutely refuse to be embarrassed by it anymore. That mask is off and gone.
How did they respond?
I'm getting a feeling in my gut even thinking about it now, but I was committed to doing what I was doing, and there was lots of applause and lots of tears. People saw me on the day and congratulated me for saying it. People sent me notes later. Some people spoke to me weeks later. Suddenly I realized that there was many people in there who probably didn't feel that great themselves. And I felt a rush of adrenaline doing that, or dopamine, whatever it was. I did have a typical OCD regret the next morning that I couldn't remember what I'd said and that I might have to check it all. But then, of course, I'd recorded it all, Simon, in my pocket. And I also had someone videoing it. Not because I wasn't, wishing to show off the fact I'd made a speech. I wanted something to check what I had said. Because if I didn't have a record of it, I'd imagine all kinds of things that I'd said that were inappropriate or wrong. But it was a great feeling.
Yeah, I mean, that must have been an incredible feeling, being able to speak openly like that after years of hiding behind it. And of course, many of those years, you weren't sure yourself what was going on, I suppose.
The way I've expressed it, and this is only thinking back now from that day, I had a backpack on with 2 big rocks in it. One was called OCD, and one was called the fear of people knowing I had it. That second rock was much bigger than the first one. And when I released that rock, I now, despite the fact I now still have OCD in me, but I control it better, that embarrassment rock has been nuked. It's never coming back. Never, never, never. Because it doesn't hurt me anymore. It can't hurt me anymore. That monster has been killed.
I mean, I suppose it's a bit of maybe a silly thing to say, but do you wish you had made that speech earlier? Not the retirement speech, but spoken up earlier? Or do you just feel that was just the right time in your story that it needed to be said?
Looking back, as life is a story, as you've set up in this thing, I think it's meant to be, really. Because there's no game without pain, really, is there? And I think I'm beginning to put it all into perspective, because the process that came after that was one of self-learning.
Yeah.
And if I hadn't done for Act 1, I couldn't have had Act 2.
So let's move on to Act 2 then. There was a shift, a discovery of something within you that you didn't realise you had, a skill and a passion for something. Talk to me about what happened next and how you've moved into writing.
Well, first of all, when I retired at the most inappropriate time possible, because I retired. I didn't even see the people I worked with before I left, because it was right on the tax year when COVID, we were in lockdown basically. So my first thought in lockdown is, I'm not going away from home. No checking. I love this. Until we had to get back out there meeting people, then I realized that my work anxieties were replaced with contamination anxieties. I now was worrying about giving COVID to my grandkids. So my OCD was not work-related. It was part of me. It was to do with my grandkids, funnily enough, where I started thinking the best way of getting rid of this demon in my head is to sidestep it, create my brain full of things that are a distraction for it so that I don't leave a vacuum. So I started writing fantasy poetry for two of my grandkids, my granddaughters. And it was all about them being superheroes with capes on, going out and doing things. It was all rhyming. And I got into this little routine with my older daughter where I would send her by mail a little post with a grandpop's token in it, where this is your story token. You can make a note of things you want to be in your story, post it back. I'll record it, send it back, and you can listen to it as a bedtime story. It was it's a nice little cutesy thing.
What a lovely idea.
And I did quite a few of them, and then it ran out of steam a bit. And then it was one day where I was in a pretty desolate, it's too extreme. I was in a very depressive mood. This is right in the middle of COVID. And my wife said to me, do you know what? I'm going to be going out for a walk now, but have you ever thought about writing a poem about how you feel? And I said, no, not really. And she went out, she came back 2 hours later, and it was done. 5 verses, 1 poem. It didn't take me long to write it, Simon. It flew out like a waterfall coming onto paper. It was my poetry, a method of expressing emotion, because expressing emotion in words is very, very difficult. It really is difficult to find the words to say, this is how I physically feel inside my heart or my stomach. I'm not an actor, but I found the only way I could do it was to put it into words. And I did that, and that was quite a day, because I also found a very important thing in there. I said to my wife, now that she'd read it and she understood how I was feeling, I said, when I feel like I've grabbed onto a bit of positivity, I'm going to tell you I'm coming back. That's my signal to you. You didn't stop worrying about me now. I've actually come through that trough, and I'm rising up a little bit. And it's very important for me, because I felt very guilty about my wife sitting looking at me, not knowing what was happening in my head.
Yeah.
And that was the start of it all. That was the precursor to Act 2.
Support from your wife, vital, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, she is more than a wife. She's a soulmate. She writes the last chapter of my book, because it wasn't planned that way. But I thought, no, she has to write the last chapter, because for all the people out there with OCD who won't even tell anybody, and I did know that from the community I spoke with online, a lot of people didn't tell anyone because they were fearful of being ridiculed, or their partners didn't know how to deal with them. And this partnership with myself and my wife was absolutely unique and therapeutic for me. It was like having a doctor on demand, and we supported each other and still do.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So poetry, 5 verses is one thing, but then moving to a book, that's another step. How did that come about?
Well, first of all, I didn't mean to write a book, and I'd always loved to write a thriller, but I didn't know where to start. I could have told you the twist at the end, but the beginning and the middle was a bit of an inconvenience, really. And I didn't know how to do it, and I didn't start off writing a book. I just wrote more poetry. And then I started writing bits of poetry about when I didn't know I had it, how I felt. The first day I Googled it and found it out, the day I was working, confided in one of my mates, the day that I shared it with another group of people, it was just pouring out of me everywhere, and it was indiscriminate. And then I'd finished the poem, so I went, right, I'm up in the pub now, I'm fed up with that, what am I going to do? Well, actually, that poem there is a bit enigmatic. I think I'll write a little commentary about it, because people won't know what it means the way I've expressed it in that poem with that repetition and stuff. I need to explain it. And then I started explaining other poems and then other poems. Then I thought, do you know what? I'm going to write about that day at work when I retired. This is going to be a long one, this. I'm going to have to think about this. And a whole section about that reveal. I called it the reveal. And then I just added bits on. Then this little folder of stuff that I printed out became a bigger folder. Then I got a green lever arch file, and I would carry it to the pub with me under my arm. And I would just add bits, and people asked me what I was doing. Oh, I'm just writing about, things. Oh, yeah, great. And eventually, when this stuff went on and on, people would ask me, are you going to write a book of poetry? I says, absolutely no, I'm not a poet. It's just been the vehicle for me expressing myself. I am not a poet. But as time went on and this book got so big, I thought, what am I going to do with it? A lot of my life's in here. And it actually felt like a 2-year-old on my hip, like a mother walking around or a father walking around the kitchen. This is my baby here. I can't ignore it anymore. I've got to do something with it. And so I made a decision. I'm going to create a story around this. because I've been reading about story making. I'm going to make this into something with a beginning, a middle, and an end. I've got the sting in the tail, Alan, but you also, this is your life. You know the whole lot. That's when I decided this ugly book of stuff that's just been chucked together is going to become a book. Then I had to do the real work to put it into some kind of order that a publisher might understand.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Do you think it's changed your relationship, your experience with your writing and putting those thoughts together? Has it changed your relationship with OCD?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I've come to, and I have had some therapy, which has helped me. I haven't done this all on my own, but I did come to an understanding that I'm unique, as we all are. I am neurodiverse. I happen to check things more than other times, but it's not an illness. I am not ill. It is me. So give yourself a break. And that's where I do now. I talk about it with anybody who will listen. I always find someone in a pub or in a queue somewhere to talk about. I'll find a way of dropping in the conversation. No one is in the least embarrassed about talking about these things. It's only in groups where we fear it, or in society as large groups of people where it's thought to be inappropriate to talk about personal things like that in public. One-on-one, no one's got a problem with it, I can assure you. And I've been so buoyed and enthused by all the people that I've met who said, you know what, I had a problem as well. I'll tell you about this. And so I've become a little bit of a confidant to some, but complete strangers on a train, in a queue, on a bus, in a pub. And that is a really warming feeling to think I could share without fear. I'm in control of it in some way, but it's part of me, and I'm celebrating that I am me. Which took a long time to get to.
Well, absolutely. So with the writing, was it always part of you, or was this something that was uncovered? I mean, did you always have a skill for writing? It's just you never had an outlet for it, or was this something that again, did it surprise you that this was in you?
Yeah, I think it was latent. I'd written little poems when I was very, very young, and then I would write the odd limerick or something in a card for someone's birthday, or a little funny story about going on holiday. But it was very much a frippery. It was like fun stuff. And I was quite good at the creative writing stuff at work. When I needed to write a letter, I could write a letter, but it's more of a business thing. So I think it was deeply hidden in there, waiting to have its time on stage. You started the theatrical. So I'm afraid I'm one. In my obsessions, I've been looking at every kind of theatrical reference I can make.
Have you ticked them all off yet? Have we still got a few more to go?
I haven't got the commercial break or the intermission yet, or queuing for the screens. But I'm a very visual person, so I need to put these things in these kind of pictures. But no, I think I've kind of come to terms with it, is that I have a creativity in me that is natural now. I have to suppress it during my work period because I had to make a living. And making a living and enjoying your latent talents is not the same thing. Because I went from school, moved into university without even being asked whether I wanted to do it or not. And life, Act 1, happened to me. Act 2 is quite different, Simon, because I am writing the script.
Yeah.
I am the director.
Yep.
I'm the marketing director, the social media organizer. I'm the gopher. I'm everything in it because I know what I want, and I've suddenly become the antithesis of who I was. I've even had to write it all down to remind myself of who the new me is. Like the first thing I ever wrote was when I was getting back on social media, because I didn't ever leave my LinkedIn community, was, I'm not retired, I'm rewired. Those 3 words describe me. If you said, say how you describe yourself, that's me. I'm rewired. My brain's now in a different, I've restructured myself. I'm the same person, but I'm realizing the things that I'm good at and that really make me alive. And I don't have all the constraints of work anymore.
Yeah.
I'm completely liberated.
Yeah.
I used to run a lot and feel that endorphin rush in an afternoon after you'd done a park run. Now, I get a dopamine fix when I've even thought of what I'm going to write. I thought of the title, how it might end. I haven't really written it yet, Simon, but I'm thinking, I'm writing this. And I get that feeling immediately. Imagine you were going to do a run and you got the endorphin fix on the start line. You could just go home and have a bacon sandwich. But I've realized dopamine is stronger than endorphin rush.
So you've been on a huge journey. What, when you look back, have you learnt? And what would you say if you had to sum up those feelings of Alan, the old Alan, the new Alan? What have you learnt about yourself so far?
I've written all the stuff down about the old me and the new me. And I've actually, despite the fact that you don't want to have rules and regulations for your future, I have had to be quite strict with myself. I don't worry about what people think of me anymore. I'm happy to be me. I don't beat myself up. If I go back to the past to think about things, I say to myself, let him off the hook. If it wasn't for him, you wouldn't be here. So I don't think I will ever learn enough about myself until I've no longer here. I just think every day is a school day, and I'm now in a position where I can validate myself. I know sometimes I put barriers in front of myself to things like the creativity. I've got so many ideas, but I've now said to myself, stop putting bricks in front. Don't buy them anymore. In fact, I'm confused by what to do next because I've got so many options in my head. And one last thing here, I thought I wanted to write musical lyrics, and I was up one night, couldn't sleep, and I saw a podcast about how Bruce Springsteen doesn't have a God-given gift. He journals. He keeps books, as many people do, and many songs become half of one song and half of another. And I went to bed that night thinking, do you know what? I could write a song like that because I do all the hard yards. I'm a grafter. I've got all these books and books of stuff. And I lay back in bed thinking, Alan, you could write a hit song. There's nothing stopping you doing it. And lying there, I could feel tears going down my face. And I thought, wow, what a feeling. Why did that thought there emote such a physical reaction? And I thought, that can't be right. So I kind of wiped my face and I lay back again a few minutes later, thought, and I repeated it to myself. And I got the same reaction. 3 times I had to do it before I realized that there was something happening to me. I was connecting with myself here. And it sums the whole of myself up right now is that I have come to terms with myself. I believe in myself. You know, I know how to get in touch with my emotions very quickly. And that's going to be the brand of my Act 2. It's not going to be anything like the first one. I am definitely directing this one. Whatever happens here, my target is self-fulfillment and happiness. However I get there.
It's a very positive story from a start of you trying to work out who you were, where you're going in your younger life. What would you say to others that are living behind a mask, be that OCD or anything else?
I'd say have someone you can speak to about it if it's not a partner. I found nobody on a one-to-one basis I met who won't partake in a conversation if the location is right, the setting is right, it's private, and you have a reason to speak. I use my book not to sell it, but to raise the issue so that they realize I'm an empath. And if you talk to me, you're going to get some sensible discussion. So it's finding confidant. For me, it was writing. For somebody else, it might be football, it might be skiing, it could be dart, it could be whatever. I can't speak for other people, but I just know that the release of sharing was powerful. And vulnerability is indeed a superpower.
Yeah.
I stole that one from somewhere, but it really is. The vulnerability is, if you think of it as being a weakness, then you are down the wrong track.
Yeah. So what would you say to others that don't understand the complexities of OCD and the label? So this is Joe Bloggs on the street that maybe doesn't have any experience, particularly with anyone close to him or her.
Yeah.
What would you say to those people?
It's not difficult. We've all got iPhones and laptops. Go to Google OCD and it's all there. It's expansive, and there are different types of OCD with different impacts. There are lots of famous people who have OCD of different types. Mine's a checking one, and others have pure OCD. Put in pure OCD and go and research it. You'll find out how it's not nice to think how somebody might live like that. So it's about Googling with it and finding out for yourself. But it's tricky. We've all got our own lives to live, and it's not easy to go and research every illness. I feel more for the people who have the condition and haven't got the bravery to find someone to talk to about it, because I feel that they maybe sometimes just enjoy talking to people who know about it in their own little way, and they're comfortable in that zone. But you have to go out of your comfort zone, otherwise other people won't learn. So it's a little bit of a cycle of, if you don't talk about it, people won't know about it. So someone has to break the cycle, and I'm the kind of person who's trying to break that cycle, if that makes sense.
Fantastic. Well, Alan, thank you so much for your time. I just really enjoyed chatting to you about your journey, I suppose, really, and how you really have moved into this later part of life with a positive outlook, one of energy and passion for your writing, and it sounds like life in general, really.
And thank you very much, Simon, for the opportunity. I've enjoyed chatting about it, if I'm honest, and I look forward to hearing more of stories on your podcast, because I've listened to many of the other ones and I've been similarly inspired by what they've talked about.
Rewired, not retired. I love that. It's clear that Alan is fully embracing his second act, enjoying his newfound passion for his writing and the creativity that it's bringing him. But I think what stands out the most for me is that liberation that Alan felt during his retirement speech, the moment he stopped living a lie and chose to speak out. Remember, he described that weight lifting as he unveiled his truth. Alan's courage to embrace his OCD as part of himself, not a flaw, transformed his shame into empowerment. And through that writing and sharing that writing, he discovered the healing power of creativity and connection. And I think his story reminds us that no matter our age or circumstances, transformation is always possible when we embrace being authentic. Vulnerability isn't a weakness, it's a superpower, he said. If Alan's journey resonated with you, don't forget to pick up his book, Breaking My Silence, and share this episode with someone you think may need to hear it. So, as Alan firmly sets foot into his second act, we'll continue the journey on our next episode. But until then, take care and goodbye.